Welcome back to another episode from Barking Bond's Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? We'd love to know. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's dive into today's gripping story. Some nights at the hospital feel like they're holding their breath. That was one of those nights. Everything felt still. The emergency lights glowed dimly across the spotless white walls, painting soft shadows that barely moved. The usual chatter among the nurses and doctors was quiet, like a whisper in a library. Footsteps echoed now and then through the wide, empty hallways. It was peaceful, almost too quiet. Everyone on the night shift thought it would be an uneventful shift, just a long stretch of calm hours. But that calm was suddenly broken. The sliding glass doors at the emergency entrance hissed open slowly, the sound oddly loud in the silence. People looked up, expecting a late-night patient or someone injured, but no one expected what walked in. It wasn't a person, it was a German Shepherd. His fur was dirty, matted with dried mud. His eyes, deep and dark, held a look that was hard to describe. Tired, yes, but something more. Determined, brave. This was Max, a retired police dog who had once served with loyalty and courage. He didn't run or bark. He didn't panic. He walked carefully, one step at a time, through the entrance. Something hung from his jaws, wrapped in a cloth so old and worn it looked like it might fall apart. The nurses froze. One of them gasped softly. Another hesitated before slowly stepping forward, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. Max gently lowered the bundle onto the cold tile floor. She bent down and began unwrapping it, her hands shaking slightly. When she saw what was inside, the air seemed to vanish from the room. It was a baby, tiny, frail, barely moving. "Oh my God, it's a baby!" the nurse whispered, her voice cracking. The calm shattered. In seconds, the quiet ER became a blur of motion. Nurses shouted instructions. Doctors rushed in. Equipment was wheeled across the floor. The baby was lifted gently, rushed onto a gurney, and surrounded by people working fast and without hesitation. No one could believe it. A dog had just walked into the hospital, carrying a baby that was dying. Max stood by the doorway, unmoving. His body was calm, but his eyes were loud with urgency. He didn't bark, he didn't whimper, he simply watched. His whole being seemed to say one thing: help him. Despite years of dealing with emergencies, trauma, and every type of medical crisis, none of the doctors or nurses had ever seen anything like this. They moved quickly, but the shock stayed in their expressions. "Check his breathing now," a doctor ordered, snapping the team into sharper focus. Another nurse leaned over the bundle again, unwrapping the cloth completely. Her fingers were cold, her breath shaky. The baby's skin was ice cold. Dirt clung to his cheeks. His chest rose and fell, but slowly, weakly. His breaths were faint and broken. "This child is severely dehydrated and looks malnourished," the lead doctor said grimly. "We need IV fluids now. Start oxygen. Stabilize his breathing." The monitor beeped faintly, slow, dragging sounds that told them how serious this was. A nurse hooked up the oxygen, carefully adjusting the mask to the baby's face. Another began checking vitals. Their movements were fast but silent, the room full of focused, determined tension. As they worked, one nurse kept glancing at Max. He hadn't moved, not an inch, still by the door, still watching, still waiting. His eyes never left the baby. There was something in his stare, something more than instinct. It was as if he understood everything happening, as if he had brought that baby here, with complete purpose. How did he even know to come here?" the nurse whispered, not expecting an answer. No one answered. They just kept working. Max stood silently, as if this was the most important mission of his life. The baby's breathing grew a little stronger. One nurse adjusted the oxygen again. Another wrapped the baby in warm cloths. "Still weak, but vitals are improving," someone said softly. A small sense of relief crept into the room. They weren't out of danger, not even close. But now, thanks to Max, that child had a chance. Max finally sat down. His body was trembling with exhaustion, but his gaze never shifted. Everyone in the room had seen hundreds of emergencies, but none like this. The news spread through the hospital like wildfire. A dog carried a baby into the ER. Within minutes, someone had called the police. Officer Daniels, a seasoned investigator, arrived not long after with his team. They stepped into the ER, eyes wide, scanning the scene. The staff gathered to tell them what had happened. Their voices were full of disbelief. "We don't know where he came from," the head nurse said, still stunned. "He just walked in, put the baby down, and stood there." Daniels frowned, looking toward the dog. Max was sitting calmly by the wall, watching the baby, still alert, still waiting. "A dog carried a baby to the hospital," Daniels muttered. "That's hard to believe." But as he looked closer at Max, he softened. The dog wasn't afraid or wild. He was focused, calm, loyal. "Has anyone scanned for a chip?" Daniels asked. A young officer pulled out a scanner and slowly stepped toward Max. But as he got close, Max backed away slightly, his body tense, not threatening, not growling, but clear. "Stay back. This dog's been trained," the officer said, stopping in his tracks. "He's definitely a retired canine." Daniels nodded. He took a step closer, slow, careful, non-threatening. "It's okay, buddy," he said softly, holding out a leash. Max didn't growl. He didn't run. He simply looked at Daniels for a moment, then allowed him to clip the leash onto his collar. "Let's see where he takes us," Daniels said, motioning to his team. Max started walking. His steps were steady, his pace determined. It wasn't random. He had a destination in mind. The officers followed, patrol car lights casting eerie shadows across the buildings and streets. The city seemed darker, quieter, as they passed through. The sleeping neighborhoods. "Where's he taking us?" one officer whispered. Max finally stopped in front of an old, run-down house in a nearly empty neighborhood. The front door was cracked open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Daniels frowned. "This is it," he said. The officers looked at one another, then carefully stepped forward. The house smelled musty, like mold and rot, old food, stale air. Max led them through the cluttered living room toward a small door at the back. "Stay sharp," Daniels warned. They opened the door and stepped into a small room, dimly lit. In one corner sat a dusty crib. Scattered around were signs of someone living there recently: a food bowl, a torn blanket, a few baby toys. Max walked to the crib and sniffed at it. Then, without a sound, he lay down beside it and stopped moving. His body slumped, his legs stretched out. He was done. His mission was over. The officers continued searching the rest of the house. Dust and silence were everywhere. Everything looked abandoned, neglected. Chairs knocked over, empty cabinets, crumpled papers littered the kitchen table. "Looks like someone left in a hurry," one officer said, flipping through papers. Another officer found something in the kitchen, a torn envelope on the counter. Inside was a letter, written in shaky, fading ink. "There's a note," he said, then began reading. "I no longer have the strength to care for him. Everything is falling apart. All I have left is Max. I know he'll do the right thing. I just hope someone someday can forgive me." The room went silent. No signature, no name. Just the voice of someone who had reached their breaking point, entrusting their baby to the only one they had left. Max. "He's been protecting the baby all this time," an officer said quietly, watching Max rest beside the empty crib. Max didn't move, just lay there. But his ears twitched slightly. He was still listening, still alert, still on guard. "We need to find the mother," Daniel said firmly. "She's in serious trouble." The officers went door to door, speaking to the few neighbors left in the area. Eventually, they found someone, an old man with a cane who lived a few houses away. "I remember the young woman who lived here," he said, his voice soft. "She was always with a big dog. That must be him, right?" He nodded toward Max. "I think she was going through a hard time. I saw her with a baby a few months back, but then she just disappeared." The story was becoming clearer. The woman had been overwhelmed by hardship, and in a moment of despair, she placed her trust in Max the dog, who'd protected her family to the very end. Based on clues from the letter and then Aber account, the police widened their search. After several hours, they received a report about a young woman wandering in an exhausted state at a nearby park. When the team arrived, they found her sitting motionless on a bench, clutching herself tightly against the cold. Her eyes were vacant, her face gaunt, and her hair unkempt. Officer Daniels approached cautiously, maintaining a serious but non-threatening tone he chose. His words carefully: "We found a child who was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house nearby. Do you know anything about this? We whinnied to ensure the child's safety." At the mention of the child, the woman's eyes widened in shock and hope. "Noah is it? Myson, is he alive?" She stammered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. She brought her hands to her mouth, her body shaking with emotion. Daniel exchanged glances with his team, recognizing that they had found the right person. He nodded gently. Andrea assured her, "We found him. Noah is currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He's stable, but still under observation." Rachel broke down in sobs. After days of despair, she finally heard a glimmer of hope. Medical personnel quickly placed her on a stretcher to assess her condition as they headed back to the hospital. Rachel began to tell her story. "Nola's father abandoned us right after he was born," she said, her voice horror with pain. "I tried to hold on, but everything fell apart. We ran out of food, out of money. I couldn't keep going." Rachel paused, her eyes distant as she relived the dark memories. "Max, he was always there for us. He never left my side or Noah's. When I was too weak to go on, I told Max. I asked him to take Noah somewhere." Safe silence filled the ambulance as the officers and medical staff absorbed the gravity of her words. The idea of a dog guiding a child to the hospital seemed impossible. Yet Max had done exactly that. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Rachel was escorted to the pediatric care unit. Her heart pounded as she approached the door, despite his exhaustion. Max stood and walked beside her, his gaze steady and vigilant inside the room. Rachel saw Herson lying on a small bed surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steady and his skin no longer looked deathly pale. Tears filled her eyes as she gently placed her hands on his tiny face. "Noah, my baby," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Max stood silently at the doorway, watching over them. With calm, observant eyes, Rachel turned to him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you, Max. You saved my son. You saved my family," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood quietly, moved by the profound moment unfolding. Before them, Max was no ordinary dog. He was a protector, a silent hero who had fulfilled his mission with unwavering loyalty and love. Rachel was allowed to stay by Noah's side as doctors continued to monitor his condition. After several hours, Noah began to show clear signs of recovery, though still weak. He started to respond faintly to his mother's familiar voice. Rachel gently held his tiny hand, her eyes filled with love and hope. Max lay near the doorway, his body still weary, but his ears alert. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story couldn't hide their admiration for the loyal dog. One nurse smiled and gently patted Max's head, whispering, "You're a real hero thanks to you. This little boy is alive." Max wagged his tails lightly as if he understood the heartfelt praise. Rachel looked at Max with deep gratitude. "You saved us, Max. I'll never forget what you've done," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. After a few days of treatment, the doctors confirmed that Noah was out of critical condition and steadily improving thanks to the dedicated care of the medical staff. The boy was slowly regaining his strength. Meanwhile, social workers at the hospital stepped in to help Rachel secure temporary housing and access essential support. The day of Rachel's discharge arrived on a bright sunny morning. She held Noah in her arms. Her face showed both exhaustion and renewed hope as she stepped through the hospital doors. Sunlight bathed her son's face. Noah opened his eyes wide in curiosity, gazing at his mother before giving her a small, gentle smile. The first one she had seen in days. Max walked beside them, his posture steady, but alert as though he still had a duty to protect them. Rachel stopped, bent down to stroke Max's head and whispered, "We made it, Max. Thanks to you, we have a chance to start over." News of their emotional story had spread throughout the local community. When Rachel arrived at her new home, strangers showed up with small gifts for Noah, clothes, food, and toys. Some even offered job opportunities to Rachel, eager to help her rebuild her life. The first few days in their new home were challenging, but with the support of kind neighbors and Max's unwavering loyalty, Rachel knew she no longer had to face everything alone. She watched as Noah crawled across the floor, his bright, lively eyes full of wonder. "We made it through, Max," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Max looked at her with his calm, wise eyes, as if to say he understood Max's story was not just one of miraculous survival. It was a testament to love and loyalty that transcended all boundaries. Rachel, Noah, and Max's emotional journey has ended with a hopeful new beginning. But this story teaches us something even deeper. The power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice can change a family's destiny forever. If you found this story inspiring, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below and tell us what you think about Max's incredible courage and the family's journey to survival and hope. Hit the like button if you want to help spread this uplifting message to more people, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. We are thrilled to have you as part of our growing community of people who cherish meaningful stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.